Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Full and Thriving. Today, I have a very special guest named Flurina Thali on the show. Flurina is an osteopath, coach, lecturer for anatomy and embryology, researcher, dancer, artist, yoga teacher, and creator and host of the Soft Rebellion podcast. She's also an eating disorder survivor who found healing through movement, body awareness, and uncovering the sacred feminine and its creative power. In today's episode, we unpack the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle in an easy way to remember so you can harness the power of your own cycle to finally start working with your body and not against it. Before we begin today's episode, I do want to let you know of a small announcement. First of all, this is going to be the last interview I have for the Full and Thriving podcast for a while, because I have decided to take a break and fully focus on clarifying and realigning my coaching practice and my personal brand. As all of you know, I love podcasting and showing up to teach you, my listeners, something new every single week. It is truly the greatest passion and joy of my professional career. And I genuinely plan to be a podcaster for life. So I won't be gone for long. Please tune in next week where I have my final solo show and I make some exciting announcements around the new direction I'll be taking moving forward. Please stay subscribed to the show. Please keep checking back for updates because I will be communicating with my audience every step of the way as I make these new changes. But for now, I hope you enjoy this beautiful and timely conversation that I have about this. But for now, I hope you enjoy this beautiful interview and timely conversation about the cycles of the body and life with my dear friend, Flurina. Hello, Flurina. Welcome to the show.
Hello, dear Meg, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Oh my goodness. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show. I remember when I was on your show almost a year ago, what a wonderful conversation we had and how you have such a great ability to be present with the people you're having a conversation with. I think you're such a great listener. I don't know. I just walked away feeling great about who you are as a person. So I'm truly honored to have you on the show to talk about the soft rebellion and everything related to menstrual cycles, because we haven't talked about that on this show in years.
Well, I'm honored and excited to fill the era, and an era comes to an end. You just shared with me with the Full and Thriving, and to fill this last wave with lots and lots of menstrual cycle wisdom and awareness.
Yes. I am so grateful to have you be actually the final guest of Full and Thriving before I take my break. It's a sentimental moment for me, honestly. I was turning on the mic and I was thinking about the hundreds of people that I've spoken to who are just brilliant minds in the eating disorder recovery space and the personal development space. And, you know, you are among some really talented people. So yeah, it's emotional in a way.
It's emotional. I feel you very much as you speak. And I think, wow, I didn't notice that before, but how divine that you chose the menstrual cycle as the last topic, because a cycle comes to an end, right? The same way as we menstruators, we cycle months by months. And there is the menstrual cycle, and that's embedded in all the other life cycles, right? From maiden to motherhood to queen to the female life cycles, but also the creative cycles. And I just think, wow, yeah, it's about also learning about menstrual cycle awareness is also about learning about the entanglement of cycles generally in life. We get aware of cycles, and I feel when we can really honor the layers of cycles, I guess it gets easier on some level to let go, and gives us courage to take big and bold new beginnings. It's about
Yes, I agree with you. It's so interesting because you're comparing it to a cycle, and this cycle in my life at the moment is coming to an end. And when your period, like say your period stops, it's because you're about to give birth to something new, right? And that feels kind of like where I'm at is in this place in my life where I'm just creating something new, and I'm taking a break to like really birth that into existence. And yeah, I think what you said about just layering cycles upon cycles, like yes, on a physiological level, we have a menstrual cycle, but on a creative level, on a professional level, on a relationship level, everybody's going through cycles, which is pretty profound. Where do you see that playing out in your life, actually?
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful question. And I immediately think back to a time in my life where I think, wow, I'm now 31 years old. not too old, but also I've lived through some years. And immediately when you ask the question, I think back to when I was much younger, when I was a girl, a teenager, when I had my period for the first time, or I think back to that moment, to all those years when I was so unaware of my menstrual cycle, generally just of the cyclical nature of my bleeding female body. And I think back and remember how I felt, how incredibly lost and desperate I felt, right? We share in common that we experienced disordered eating. And yes, so I immediately think back or remember that moment, and I see how I gradually, it's also in the same way, like the eating disorder process for me was an uncovery process. It was an uncovery process of these hidden cycles. And at the moment, how it plays out is that I kind of recovered or grew into a life where I'm really aware of, I think, especially my menstrual cycle and my creative cycle. And it's such a joy to observe and witness, wow, when I'm in that place in my menstrual cycle, how does that play out in my business or creativity, and how they both nurture and challenge each other.
That's so interesting. We keep bringing up the word cycle, and even in eating disorder world, we talk about cycles like patterns, the binge purge cycle, the binge eating cycle. Like there are cycles woven into every area of our lives. And you know, you actually brought us back to that first cycle you had. And I'm really curious because we talked before we started about how your eating disorder started when you got your first cycle. And it sounds like you were very detached from your body during that time. Could you share more about maybe your youth and that disconnect from your cycle, and what kind of brought you into the awareness of the menstrual cycle?
Yes, I'll just dive in somewhere, and you can equally interrupt if you feel I'm losing you. Again, this is such a big and deep and wonderful question. And Mark, what is the best moment to start? Yeah, I think I'm back when I was 11 years old, which, you know, looking back in time, it all makes so much literally divine sense. Because the interesting thing in my life journey, my cyclical journey, and also eating journey is that when I was 11 years old was when I had my first bleed, my menarche. That's what it is called. And that was the same year when I started, or when my eating disorder emerged. It was literally, it's I think, good as me. It's looking back at time fascinating. It was what maybe I have to say when a girl has her first bleed, the menarche, this is a huge initiatory process and journey. It is a rite of passage. It is the moment when she awakens to what some people called wild power. maybe I briefly say I learned a lot from a place called Red School, and I want to honor the lineage. And they call this wild power. So at Menarche, a girl awakens to her wild power. And it's really also the moment when we are birthed into the dreams which feed our calling for what we are meant to go forward, which is why it's so important that we talk about it so that we can create a container for girls where that is acknowledged. But so I was 11 years old. I had my first bleed. Theoretically or spiritually, that's what happens. But at the same time, the environment and the world I was in, right? The moment when I went to school, I think back and I think, wow, I grew up in a pink, loving childhood with my family, really blessed. There was no right and wrong. It was wonderful. And I went to school and suddenly it was linear. It was just one direction, and that there was right or there was wrong. And looking back in time, I see how there was right and wrong. And therefore I knew, or I felt unconsciously, my body is wrong. I was taller than anyone else. I had red cheeks. I feel I did look different already, especially my height. I was the tallest. I thought that was very difficult for me.
Did you know I'm really tall too? I was the tallest. I'm always the tallest. It's a weird thing. People don't talk about that too much. Like, I think women who are taller than everyone else and like taller than the boys, and it's tough on the self-esteem and the body image because you're taught, like, yes, women are programmed to be small, like through fake body standard, body standards weight wise, but also like small size wise. And that was really hard. That's hard because you're just bigger than everyone naturally when you're taller than everyone.
Absolutely, Meg. And I do remember feeling ashamed for my height, or feeling, it's feeling ashamed for my height. And then I think that's the other important thing to say with Menarche, with that it's an incredible moment, but also psychologically, it's a moment where we girls, women are incredibly vulnerable and tender. So looking back in time, I wonder if the emergence of that eating disorder was kind of a desperate scream of me saying, whoa, I don't know how to handle that, all that feminine power. I don't know how to handle my wild power, how to say yes to that woman, which was just about to kind of was about to unfold out of me, right? So that was kind of the start of me meeting my menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And wow.
When I think of your story too, and like the symbolism of, you enter into this world, like you emerge into womanhood, which is based in like a cyclical pattern. But school and the world that most of us grew up in is very masculine, linear. So it's like a physiological clash with like the way women are meant to exist versus the way society is set up. So I could see, if you're a very sensitive little girl, that you feel wrong without knowing exactly why in that way. Because you're like, I'm feeling my hormones and my emotions like cyclically now, but everything else is just step by very patriarchal foundation, which doesn't fit. Absolutely. And so it happened to me, and I know it happened maybe to listeners and to millions of other menstruators, how we have this experience, or the experience of our first bleed is kind of we literally bleed into an environment which is filled with menstrual shame, with menstrual stigma, it's a taboo, it's a stigma. Right. And, there are so many studies, the relationship between how menstrual shame leads to body shame, and that leads to things like eating disorders. And it's in a way also wonderful and beautiful to talk to you about that now, because the more I become aware of it and I share it, I feel each time I heal a certain part, or I honor something which I wasn't able to honor. Yes, it is so important that we talk about it now, just because I think a lot of us did grow up with that shame. Like while you were talking, I was like, I didn't want to get my period. I was so like afraid. I was almost embarrassed to just get it and felt like it, it felt like a big deal, but I felt like I also had to hide it for some reason, right? Where it could just be celebrated as a very natural thing, but it does definitely connect to body shame, I think, because it is part of your body. It is, the
Absolutely.
beginning of a lot of change in your life. So bringing it back to your story, though, I am curious, what sparked your interest in actually studying the menstrual cycle?
Yeah. I need to respond to something you just said because that really touched me. And I want to say that because I know you are not the only one who went through that saying, I didn't want to get my period, which I would translate today means I don't want to receive myself. Because within the cycle is the wisdom within the cycle is who you are. And rejecting our menstrual cycle, and I'm saying that so clear, rejecting our menstrual cycle, it means rejecting yourself. And may this be also a power talk and invitation for all of us.
Yes.
Even if it feels hard and painful, to start to say yes.
Yes. And I think part of that was just unawareness around the power of it and what it truly meant and how it's not something to be ashamed of. But when it comes down to rejection of self, it does bring it back to also like when we do have eating disorders and our body can no longer menstruate. And when we have eating disorders, that is a full rejection of self. Right.
Absolutely.
So like if you're resisting or you don't want your period or you're so sick, you just can no longer have your period.
Exactly.
The symbol you are fully rejecting who you are.
Exactly. And we can dive into practices about how we can connect with the cycle, even if we don't have a cycle a little bit later. But you asked me about to continue the journey, what sparked my interest in studying the menstrual cycle. And I have to smile. Life is beautiful, right? We have so many ideas of where we want to go to, and then we end up in a complete different place. But really what sparked my interest, I think that brings me to share about what I think is the paradox and the beauty about my journey at the same time, because basically the more I started to reject my body and push my body away, at the same time, the more I felt, I don't even know what word I need to use, Meg. I felt almost not addicted, but I felt an urge to study the human body in all its depth, right? I first studied dance, then various movement practices. Then I moved to the UK to become an osteopath because I knew about the amount of anatomy and physiology. So I literally, it's in a way crazy. I had days I would eat so little, but kind of push my body away, but study it in all its depth at the same time. So kind of that hunger of really learning about the body has been that is what my life is about. And to share and teach, I've been lecturing anatomy, embryology is what really fulfills my heart. And gradually, I think over the years, that interest, that urge of studying the human body in all its depth transformed into an urge of studying the female body in all its depth. Or maybe I have to say, it was when my recovery was really on a beautiful recovering path and I still had to practice and still had to look at certain patterns, etc. But I felt the light and I knew I'm recovering. I think it was especially in that phase when I noticed, wow, this is as much about me as it is, we talked about society, what I learned about values and norms, what I got taught about the masculine, the feminine. And I realized, wow, this is about uncovering something really sacred, something which I just put a lid on throughout all these eating years. And we both know the wonderful Anita Johnston. Her book was an absolute catalyst and game changer for me. And I noticed, whoa, yes, what am I truly hungry about? And that all those invitations of diving into, I call it also the sacred feminine, to uncover the archetypal feminine. That really, when I opened that door, I knew that's the path I have to go. And then you know what? How did I actually land with the menstrual cycle? I literally stumbled upon one book which was about menstrual cycle awareness, and I read that book, and it was such a deeper portal towards meeting what I try to define. What does it mean to have a female body? That I just couldn't. I knew I will never stop talking about the menstrual cycle, and I know that I will never do so.
Oh, that's so beautiful. The progression of just fascination with the body and intertwined with your recovery. And when you now that you are fully informed on the cycle, I'm curious, what are the phases of the menstrual cycle? And maybe how can women use each phase to their benefit? Like we have never been taught this in school, right? And we are actually taught to just like power through every phase and ignore every phase. Essentially just pretend the cycle doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, this is such a wonderful question. And such an important question. It's such an important question. What can we harvest from our menstrual cycle? Because, and I want to acknowledge at this very moment that even if listeners, there might be a listener and you might so far have met your menstrual cycle mainly through pain, through anger, through rage, through discomfort, maybe even through early pregnancy. You might, right now, the menstrual cycle might be disconnected to something uncomfortable. And I just want to acknowledge that before I go into that, because it can be so triggering to suddenly hear someone talk about the fruits and glory of the menstrual cycle. And also, I want to just briefly say that the menstrual cycle your cycle is never the issue or the problem. It's the society, environment, or maybe the general health around, but your cycle is perfect. So how can we harvest from the cycle? And you're absolutely right. You mentioned the 4 seasons, and there is an incredible woman out there called Alexandra Pope. She's now in her 70s. I've studied with her at Red School. And she, many years and cycles and moons back, she is the pioneer of that work, of those inner seasons. And she really embodied and worked through her cycle so that she came to name, and she figured out, wow, actually, within our cycle, we need 4 seasons, right? Like we need 4 seasons in nature. And that is the approach or concept which now has been taken on by so many people. And it's so helpful, and I take it on board as well, because we all know about the seasons in nature. And so as I share and listen, do think about the seasons in nature. So our menstrual cycle exactly has what we call an inner winter, an inner spring, an inner summer, and an inner autumn.
I love that. I've only heard of the 4 phases, but I like how you're calling them seasons, and you're already making them more easy to understand, because we can connect each phase to a season on the calendar. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's very the basics. Or if we now would have to stop talking, I would just say, think about what nature needs in each season and try to give that to yourself. That's in a way what it is, right? Our inner winter starts with the first day of our bleed is generally the first day of our cycle. So for anyone who is completely new to menstrual cycle awareness, it starts with you tracking your menstrual cycle. That's the start, to just actually write down what day am I on and just notice, how do I feel? That's the start. So next time you have your first day, your first blood coming, which means literally blood, not brown and discharged mucus blood. That's day 1 of your cycle. And if we talk about, for the sake of easiness, we think about a 28-day cycle. Then about day 1 to day 6 is your inner winter. And like in nature, right? What does nature do in inner winter? In winter, it's the period of rest. The land rests. It's the time of, well, from the outside, it just looks completely still nothing happens, but deep in the soil, it's the soil is getting recovered, is getting rejuvenated, right? Nature prepares so that there is enough energy for in spring new things to sprout. And it's exactly the same with our cycle. In our winter, Meg, we are physiologically at the lowest point of our energy.
I believe that. I feel that.
Right? That's just the fact. We are at the lowest point of our energy. And this is because we are meant to rest. We are meant to recharge our batteries, to really come home, to anchor ourselves on a kind of a bigger scale or in a wider sense, to remember, to come home, to remember who we are, to drop into our own inner temple, to surrender, to let go. These are the tasks of winter.
And so what would that look like for, like, just on a practical level? Like, what are some ways you can kind of tap into that season of the cycle?
I'm so glad you asked it because it's bloody hard. In the world we live in, it's I'm so glad you asked that. And the winter, the way we bleed is setting the tone for the rest of our cycle. So it's great if we actually talk a little bit more about winter. The amount of rest we can give ourselves. If you take anything from this episode, then try what happens if I rest 1% more during my next bleed and just see what happens, because it's setting the tone. And because exactly living in the world we live in, our work doesn't stop when we bleed, not yet. Our kids are still around.
Yeah.
So, and there, my teacher, Alexander, she always talks about the 1% rule. And I really like that. You don't have to go from 0 to 100%. I mean, if you can, to just completely surrender and let your work drop for 2 days, then do it, because it will bring miraculous stuff and wisdom into your life. But if you can't, ask yourself, what is the 1% rest I can give myself? And maybe that means I sleep 1 hour longer. Maybe that means I'm canceling that one podcast and I just take my blankets and I just lay onto my own floor, or I go into the park, or during my bleed, I have that one bath, which I usually don't. Or maybe it looks like for my bleed, I pre-cook a soup and lasagna. That's what I always do. Or I do a big shop so that I don't have to go shopping. I think it can be small, simple things, or you can start with something small, simple.
A small percentage. So I like the way, it's easy to think about, like, it's just 1% shift in your day-to-day towards more rest. And I think everyone needs more permission to rest. And so if you're on your cycle, it's literally a red flag in a way.
Yes.
That says, rest, time to rest. And I need that. I know when I have my cycle and, like, the cramps, I still get pretty rough cramps at times. And those are like begging me to rest. It's like you almost have to.
You have to rest. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So what about spring? Tell me about this phase. And because I assume the next phase is like the calendar, we're moving into spring.
Yeah.
What is it like in the female body? What's going on during that time?
Yeah. So let us transition into spring, because the transitions are actually are the hardest times when we transition from one season to the next. And they're also the most potent, because for a very moment we find ourselves in kind of empty land, right? We kind of left a land, winter, we kind of landed in winter, and I know how it looks like and feels, and suddenly we transition for a moment, are a little bit like, ooh, and we all know that we have these moments in our cycle when we feel suddenly really, really vulnerable or fragile. It's often when you transition, start to notice when you
Oh,
transition into a
wow.
different
Okay.
season, you kind of leave a territory, you just got really comfortable and woof, you meet something new. And so in inner spring, I just have to say one thing about the winter that it makes sense. The whole point, I'll keep it short, the whole point of resting in winter is so that we can become receptive for something greater to be revealed to us. Menstrual cycle awareness brings back, reveals the mystical aspects of life, which we are mystical beings. And it is in our inner winter where we can, if we do really rest, just really receive so clear guidance and ideas, and it's beautiful. I let
I think
listeners.
that's really interesting to connect winter to rest and also what's happening mentally. You are coming up with while you're resting, you're coming up with ideas, gaining clarity, thinking about, I don't know, what's next, I assume.
Absolutely. It's as if we receive a letter every winter, which if we wouldn't rest, we might never be able to read that letter. I find that quite a good metaphor because it kind of nudges us to, I better gonna read those letters.
It's funny, like as you're talking, I feel like I'm going through one huge life cycle. I gave birth in the fall and I rested, reflected a lot. Like literally this life letter that you're talking about, I received the life letter just recently, which is why I'm pausing the show because I listened and I feel like I'm entering a spring.
I'm so glad you bring that in. Absolutely. Right. Motherhood has cycles. Well, you are in your inner winter of motherhood and how that invited you or maybe sparked also. No, I just yes to what you said. Absolutely. You received so much insights in that rest. You received the gift in resting.
Oh, man, everyone needs to just rest more. This is the bottom line of like half the episode.
You know what? It is the flipping bottom line. Body line. It is the bottom line. Menstrual cycle awareness teaches us to reclaim our rest. 100%. So that then when we transition into spring, that's the time when in spring we are like a freshly hatched chick, right? We leave that inner temple. We do step out into the world again. Our estrogen starts to rise. Our energy rises. We step into the world, and yet we are still quite kind of thin-skinned. Still, we are still quite fragile and vulnerable. And the task in spring is new things sprout and blossom. Is just to be playful, to be spontaneous, to try yourself out without criticizing and judging. In inner spring, that's the time when where our task is to cherish the uniqueness we are, our innocent being, Meg, and just cherish that, however she shows up, and to really, critique comes in and to say, okay, critique, I hear you, but this is not your place in the cycle. I meet you elsewhere in your autumn. Right now, I just shamelessly write down. Maybe in the spring it's when you think, I'm going to try out a complete new post idea on Instagram, or you say, I'm going to try a new way of podcasting. It can be practicing like that. It's the time when
it's like experimental.
Playful. Absolutely experimental and also just kind of listening to what ideas are starting to maybe take a bit of stronger shape within one, while still holding the cards close to your chest. That's such a nice image. You kind of see what cards are there in your card set, but hold them a bit close, not yet to show it to the whole world. Kind of cherish its uniqueness and just try out.
That's so fun. I like the energy of the inner spring. I like that it's a little playful. It's you're not judging yourself. You're just trying things on, seeing how they fit for you. And I love that. So what would that, I guess, how long does that last in this 28-day cycle?
Yeah, so let's say 28-day, we said winter is about day 1 to day 6, and in the spring is around then day 7 to day 12, about day 12. Usually around day 13, 14 is when we ovulate, which is when we step into summer.
Okay, so around day 12, so your period is over, you're feeling, what do you feel in your body during the spring phase?
I'm again so glad you asked that question, because often it sounds very cool, spring, right? Just to try yourself out. But reality is, and it's good that we say that, because that I'm sure that resonates with listeners. Reality is that spring can be fucking hard. It can be really, really, really hard. For me, Meg, spring is the hardest season. And I think that brings us back to what we said in the beginning, right? The spring of our menstrual cycle is a reflection of the spring of our whole life, which the spring of our life is year from birth to around 25, is when we meet our period and we have menarche in our first cyclical years, is when a lot of us in today's world experience menstrual shame, body shame. We get criticized for our ideas. For most, if we talk about women eating disorders, the age they would develop an eating disorder. So very often, unconsciously, in inner spring, we meet some deep old wounds. We notice how our body just wants to try out and be playful, but we grew into such a strong critic, right? When I'm still practicing, when I go into spring, I find it hard because that critique is so strong. Wow. That voice which says, you're not good enough. And I know that very well. Who are you to try this? No one will listen. No one will read it. Yeah, that's also important to say.
Okay, I'm glad we went there. I think so there's a lot of inner, I guess, angst and turmoil at times during spring, because there's that critic, so your body wants to be light and playful, but your wounds are making it difficult to access that. And
absolutely.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I hope people listening are just building that awareness, right? Even though it's the spring, you have to take good care of you still have to take care of yourself and have compassion, so that those ideas can flow and the changes you're playing around with can come to life.
Absolutely. And to make that very pragmatic, right? What does that mean? So an invitation is, what can I do in the spring to soothe my nervous system? Maybe it's a gentle yoga, some EFT tapping, whatever works, whatever breathing things, any practice which really soothes your nervous system. Do that in your inner spring on a daily basis, because our bodies need that to cope with the speed of the world around us, which we suddenly meet again, when we kind of step out of menstruation. And so that is one very practical step. What can I do to soothe my nervous system? And very practically, notice your critique and tell that voice very clearly, that's not your place. I will meet you. I will attend to you, but not right now.
I like that.
That's really been a life changer, Meg, to just say, for the moment, bugger off.
That's awesome.
It's just not your place.
So let's transition into fall. How does that look in the body? What does that feel like? And what happens during that time?
Did you say fall, inner autumn?
Inner autumn. Summer? Yes. I use fall. It's very American to say. Autumn sounds much nicer.
Absolutely. So after spring, we have a couple of days, the same amount of days, also through our inner summer, but let's talk more about autumn.
Oh my gosh, my brain is
You're jumping a season.
I'm jumping a season. I forgot about summer. I love fall so much. I'm just waiting for you to talk about fall. But let's talk about summer.
Let's talk about summer. Fall. And immediately it's amazing that you actually skipped it, because that's exactly what's happening in our inner summer. people who track the menstrual cycle, or if you start doing it, you might notice that during your inner summer, you actually forget to track the cycle. That's the moment, that's the season where suddenly you notice, oh my gosh, I completely didn't journal. Because during our inner summer, that's where we are, Alexandra says, for 10 days, superwoman. We are at the height of our energy. It's the time to really let our hair down, take the stage, and really show ourselves, own our own expression and show ourselves to the world the way we are. It is the time when it's easy because of all the hormonal support we have to raise our voice, to have an argument, to speak, to share your point, your opinion. So summer is, you might notice, Meg, if you start to kind of be more conscious about, is when I can easily mother my child, and I can also look after my niece and my neighbor kids. It's where we have lots of those mothering abilities also. We can multitask. So that's the season to book 5 podcast episodes in a lot of time.
So we're the most productive. We're the most kind of, I'm assuming, clear thinking.
Yeah.
And how are the emotions during this phase?
So the emotions during this phase, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, right? That's also really important to say or to acknowledge that in the end, there is the big red rule is that all our menstrual experiences are different. But usually my emotions during this phase is I feel very confident. I feel I'm in the world. I feel I can hold the world. I feel I can hold the world. I can cope with that. Lots of, is that a cope? That's not an emotion, but I feel very confident. I feel myself very strongly. For me, that's also linked to lots of trust. The emotions, is that emotion? Pleasure is not emotion, but during inner summer, there is a big theme is also pleasure and celebration. It is the time to celebrate what you did, what you do, but also celebrate who you are. And to also give space to pleasure, to ask yourself, wow, what brings me pleasure on a physical and on an emotional, on all levels.
And on this level too, so you're entering ovulation phase. So you're fertile during this phase. You have the ability to conceive during this phase. And I'm
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, good that you say. Yeah, no, go on.
I think that is very much related to summer, like being able, like productivity, being able to, I don't know, like create during this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. If we think about nature, exactly ovulation, summer is, usually it's also a time where women feel more attractive, also women, where we feel attractive. Because again, our hormones nature does want us theoretically to reproduce, right? And it is a great time to step out, to meet people, to go on a date. I would definitely rather go on a date in my inner summer than in the spring.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I think these are all really helpful reminders, like for people to just be more aware of their cycle and the phases that you're in can support your intentions if you kind of plan around what phase you're going to be in. So the superwoman summer, go on the dates, book the meetings, do the interviews, I don't know, go shopping, get your clothes that make you feel good, all those things. So
absolutely. Absolutely. What you just said. Absolutely. The menstrual cycle in that way, really, that's why it is so joyful and also really pragmatic and just helpful. Why it's our best guide and coach, because we can actually, it's more, it's not efficient, but life, I feel, becomes so much easier because I do the things in the moment where nature within me can really feed and support them. We learn to work with our body, Meg. And not against her.
Oh man, it's so funny. While you're talking, I'm like, well, I feel like the world is set up for women to just feel like they should be in summer 28 days out of 28 days, right?
Absolutely.
It's like in my mind, I'm like, darn, I wish summer was much longer than 10 days, like to be on top of your game, to be able to multitask, to be able to accomplish, to be productive. Like our world is set up for us to, like, quote, should be in summer, all like in this cycle. And I know that we need to actually pay attention and like listen to our body in the other cycles and not try to make our cycle just one giant summer, because that's not physiologically what's happening.
You so got it. I call it, our society is what I call an inhale society. Like you could all think of the cycle with it's spring, summer is an inhale expansion when we go out, and autumn, winter is the exhale where we turn inwards. And we ended up, we created one big summer inhale society, which burns us out.
Right.
Makes us sick.
So true. So we have the summer phase kind of outlined. What about the inner autumn?
Exactly. So hearing what you just said, reminding us all that we are not only summer, means that during our inner summer, we have to develop that muscle or that ability to kind of enjoy the flow and the bigness, but to know that this is going to come to an end. That's the first important thing, to have that awareness. Wow, I'm right now being superwoman, and this will come to an end. And we have to learn to listen when that transition happens.
Yeah.
That's really important for most menstruators. I think that transition from summer to autumn, pre-menstrual, that is which is really, really hard.
So autumn is the PMS era.
Autumn is the one season which gets and got exactly so much stigma and blame, and it's because of the autumn is why women were told to be mad and crazy and blah blah blah, when the world around us is actually crazy, right? It's not that our pre-menstruum is crazy. It's because the world around isn't supporting us, that we can really harvest the gifts of our pre-menstruum.
So it's so funny because I think of like the pre-menstruum, and I think of like, physically you feel the sensations, like you feel some cramping, you feel more tired, all of those things. And we are taught, maybe you're more emotional. People are told, I'm not saying everyone's like this, but sometimes you're more moody and things of that nature. And so we're kind of taught to not like our pre-menstruum era or like season. And so what are the benefits of that season? How do we harness the power of that season? Because right now I'm not really aware of what that's meant for, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important, again, to just briefly zoom out and see the cycle, see the whole cycle. We journeyed so far. We started with the one pole, menstruation, and we came to the other pole, ovulation. Menstruation and ovulation are like the two poles within that whole circle or cycle. So, and we had these first kind of inhale seasons, spring and summer. And with stepping into autumn, we step into the exhale season. That's the part of our cycle which is about turning inward, slowing down. And I say that because if we don't see that cyclical whole, we don't see that in order to harvest autumn and winter, we do need to slow down, and we do need to start to literally turn inwards. I just say that first because otherwise nothing else makes sense. And that's what nature does. Nature isn't on 24/7. Nature isn't on 365 days a year. Well, she is on all those days, but there is winter and there is summer. So it is a bit I'm still really learning about this season, which is why I know this. I'm getting a bit stagnant with my words. But I think that's the most important, that we notice, wow, I'm entering the second half of my cycle, where it's less about what is in the outside. It's about really what is in the inside. It's about remembering who I am. And basically if we said an inner winter is when we surrender and rest in our inner temple, which means the pre-menstruum is like the walk to that inner temple, right? And if we walk too quickly, too ignorant, too busy, we very likely gonna miss the door to that inner temple. Again, I'm using a metaphor for my D teacher. I just really want to acknowledge her. But it's such a helpful metaphor to think about how the premenstruum is the walk to that inner temple, the place of greatest rest and insight, the place where we talked about the letters. So maybe that already changes something for you and for listener. If you think about the whole inner autumn as that gradual slowing down and arriving, becoming really attentive not to miss the door to the inner temple. And on a practical level, that means it's a time to reflect, like in autumn, on one level to harvest, in order to harvest fruit, to harvest, celebrate and harvest. Wow, what did I all do during my cycle already? Really celebrate and harvest what went really well. Also, that's the place to talk with the inner critique. That is the place where we are really psychologically more able to kind of sit with the inner critique and to listen to her. So very pragmatically, it's the moment to think, okay, what worked well and what didn't work well.
So it's like a reflective period.
Absolutely. It's a very reflective period. And with that, then maybe also the period where often in my inner autumn, I think, okay, before I'm going to surrender my bleed, is there still someone I need to actually speak something out, clarify something, send that email? It's also very practically the place to edit. You can literally, I think it actually goes well to edit writing in that time. We have that very kind of true speaking ability. We see what worked, what doesn't, what feels right. And in a way, maybe we have this ability to, in a good way, to be very direct. But that can come across, well, I guess that's where this autumn also has got blamed as the witchy or mad place, right? Because we speak out our truth and not everyone wants to hear our truth. That's the truth.
Yeah. And I think that is a really important reminder too. Like, it's okay to be direct. It's okay to be assertive. And like during those times, like if that's the time to be doing those things, you've reflected, you've gotten your clarity, you're kind of closing the loop, right? You're closing the cycle so that by the time you do bleed, you can rest.
You got it. Absolutely. It's the time I love to clean the house before I bleed, to do the shopping, fill the fridge.
Get ready. You're preparing. You're preparing for
ready
winter.
to rest. And you know what, Meg? If in that way, it suddenly can become such a... I mean, I love my bleeds. I love to bleed. And I don't want to miss any single drop or day of my bleed. And therefore, I love to prepare for my bleeds. Yeah.
How do you prepare? Do you do anything? Do you do anything like a ritual or anything like that, or routine?
Such a lovely question. I think, especially in the last year, I became quite a radical menstrual cycle. I became quite radical in a good way, which means my biggest ritual is that I plan ahead. When I bleed, I see, luckily I have a regular cycle, so I see when is my next bleed. And as much as I can, at least 2 days, and it's hard, but I'm getting there and it's so profound. My creativity business is thriving much more. It is really cool. So my biggest ritual is to plan ahead and just let go for 2 days as much as I can. And I guess that is the most important one. And then, I definitely clean the house. Good food for me is important. I do a cacao ceremony when I bleed. That's a really lovely ritual.
That sounds nice. I want to get my own cacao. I was looking into that the other day.
It's so amazing. It's wonderful.
Wow. So you've just walked us through the whole cycle, and I really appreciate your connection to the seasons. I know when people talk about the cycles, usually it's very scientific and like they have these like scientific names, and I love thinking about it in this way. It feels so much more natural and relatable to think of this. And I guess one question I have after what you just shared, and then I think we can wrap up the show. But
Yeah,
one question I do have is, what about the people who don't have regular cycles? What if it's irregular, or they miss a few months and then it comes back? Like, briefly,
yeah.
how would you help those individuals?
I think that's such an important question. And as I said, luckily I'm gifted with such a regular cycle, and which makes it so much easier because you can plan ahead. And I also say that because obviously that means I can't speak out of experience how I would or how I dealt with irregular cycles. I think an important thing to mention here and takeaway is that even, first of all, maybe if we don't have a cycle, someone listening who is in the cyclical years but doesn't have one, also pre or post-menopausal women, there is the moon cycle. And the moon cycle is in sync with our menstrual cycle. The moon cycle goes through those same seasons with the two poles of full moon and new moon and waxing and waning moon. Can't say these words. So a wonderful way to cycle is if you orient with the moon. So the first day of the new moon is the first day of the cycle. And that can just be really, I have to be very honest. I'm aware of where the moon is with my cycle. I kind of play with that. I think, oh, interesting. When I bleed with that moon, that feels different. But I've never kind of purely oriented myself with the moon cycle. But that is a really wonderful and potent way to stay connected to the cyclical. And I sometimes wonder I wonder, Meg, when I didn't get my cycle for many years after I recovered. And I wonder if I would have just brought awareness to the cyclical, maybe it would have supported it to kind of come earlier. I don't know. I can't know, but I wonder.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I believe that could be real. I think that could be true.
I think so.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like just kind of preparing your body for the cycle by connecting to the natural moon cycle. I see that working. Obviously, we don't have scientific proof in front of us, but I like where you're going with that.
And for the irregular cycles, I think, again, I don't have direct experience, but what I feel is really important, just even more to be so present with the daily check-ins, to be so present with how do I feel today? What is alive in me? To develop such a presence that one can actually start to, because we can be aware of, we can actually feel ovulation. I don't always actually feel it, but I know many women who develop that absolute sensibility to know exactly, oh, that's how I feel a day before my ovulation. Wow. But the more aware we get, the more we are able to probably to hear those very subtle changes and sounds and nudges of which give us orientation because things repeat themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the invitation for irregular cycles.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that too. And I love how at the beginning of this conversation, you brought up the cycles coming to an end, and you are the last guest on Full and Thriving before I take this break. And this has been such a wonderful, beautiful final conversation before I say goodbye for a temporary period of time. So I'm just grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Meg. It's been joyful walking the path of the cycle. And yeah, we didn't think about that, but how meaningful for a cyclical episode to be the last one. Exactly. Because that is life. There is a beginning and there is an end. With your podcast, with that, yeah. And
oh man,
thank you for all the work you did with Full and Thriving.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. And I'm excited to share this episode with the world. And for everyone listening, how can they connect with you?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, that's an exciting question because talking about cycles, I'm in a spring of what I want to bring into the world, but it's kind of crystallizing more clearly. And if you would like to keep in touch, one invitation is to listen to my podcast, the Soft Rebellion podcast, where you find a wonderful episode with Meg.
Yeah.
And an other invitation, which I'd love to speak out, is I'm at the moment preparing a very menstrual cycle inspired and free workshop online. So people can join that from all over the world. Menstrual cycle awareness really is shaping a body of work, which I call exploring the wild and poetic landscapes of the female body. And I just want to share that and give that to the world and see how it lands and receive feedback. So that's going to happen this summer. And the best thing, if you feel, wow, yeah, I'd like to join that journey, then head over to my webpage and sign up for the newsletter. I'm not sending newsletters at the moment, but I will send the invitation this spring. So
I love that. And what's your website?
My webpage is very simple, flurinathali.com. That's also where you can find the podcast and or just send me an email. I love receiving how things land with you and I respond because this is a conversation.
Yes. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm excited for you to offer that workshop and for listeners to have your show to listen to. And I appreciate the work you do. So thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you so much, Meg. Amazing. You are amazing.
You're amazing. All right. Talk soon. Thank you.
Bye.
So there you have it. Another episode of Full and Thriving in the books. I want to personally thank you for joining me in listening to today's show. And if you found value in this conversation, I would be so grateful if you could please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave a review. Your support not only helps us reach more people who are striving to live their most full and thriving life, but it also allows us to bring on even more incredible guests with valuable insights that can change your life. Every follow, every review makes a huge difference, and together we can continue to grow this beautiful community. Thanks again for being a part of the journey, and we'll see you next time on Full and Thriving.